So the project, the task at hand today is diving back into the K-swapped Cefiro build. So I'm building this as kind of the ultimate street drift car for me, my dream street drift car that I can drive to the track with tires in the trunk. I can go street drifting in Mexico, a car that is like the simpler days of drifting for me, but a way better version of the one I had back then. I have my LS3 Miata, and it's great, and it's a good competition car, and it's gnarly and it's rowdy, but it's a different thing. You got to tow it in a big enclosed trailer, and it eats tires, and it's a different thing. And this is the simpler thing. Just, again, a way nicer dream version of the simpler form of drifting, of just driving to the track and having fun. So anyway, all that being said, we got a lot of parts for this thing, we got a lot of work to do, and nothing left to it but to do it. So I'm not gonna jibber jabber on too long, we're gonna dive straight in. The first thing we need to tackle is working on getting our intake manifold on. Now this engine came in a front wheel drive car, so there's a lot of weird design features that just make no sense in a rear wheel drive car, and that's something we've got to take care of. So the first thing we need to do is get this whole water pump alternator housing assembly off. This thing is really elaborate. It's kind of an awkward setup, and we're gonna have to make some changes to it to make our stuff fit and do rear wheel drive K-series things. So let's get straight into it. Ooh. Easy enough. Alright, so this is our water pump housing alternator bracket combination. This is a JDM one. Our engine is out of a JDM TSX. It was imported here. This is a USDM one. So instead of the alternator bolting from the front, it bolts in from the side. Basically, what that's going to allow us to do is have more clearance on the top for our intake manifold, which is going forward instead of this way. And it's going to allow us to do some other things that we can't do with this setup. So this is USDM, JDM. It'll also give us a USDM alternator, which means it'll be easier to find replacement parts for, which is a big thing in building a car. You always want to make sure, if possible, that the parts you're using are parts that are readily accessible if you're going to be beating on the car and traveling far with it on something like Drift Week. Because if you kill a JDM alternator and you're halfway across the country, might be tough to find one instead of just going to the parts store. So luckily, my buddy Raldo, really good friend of mine, he happened to have a USDM K24 sitting at his house, had this whole assembly, so we didn't have to track it down, we didn't lose any time. Raldo saved the day. All right, we got this thing clearance. We will have to add our thermostat housing and stuff onto this. We're gonna change the water pump. We're gonna clean it up more, but I'm just trying to figure out if this is gonna fit or not. Try to toss the intake on. Let's get this thing actually fitted up. Yeah, look at that. Go ahead and toss a couple nuts on it. Oh, the studs might not, they should work with the gasket. The nut bottom's out. Yeah, we might have to pull these studs back out. They might work, we'll see. Oh yeah, so we're good, we got clearance. Clearance. Definitely looks cool to see it with an intake manifold. It looks a whole lot more complete. So like I said, I wanna make sure I can get this back off. Ooh, I might not, it might hit the thing. So I might have to finish all this up, get this back on. Let's see, let's try it. Nope. Yeah, so we're gonna have to install this before this. This is why you check. Fresh tube of Honda Bond. All right, now we're ready to toss the old girl back on. So I took the stud that was up here and put it down here, up top. Alright, so we've got this coolant bypass to install. So there's a coolant port here that would normally go through the intake manifold. Since we're running the older style, non-cooled intake manifold aftermarket design, we don't need this port. We got to do something with it. So instead of just blocking it off, we've got this plate which will go here with an O-ring. And it'll give us another coolant port. Now we can either run this to a swirl pod, we can run it as one of our turbo feed lines. We got a lot of options here. My plan at the moment is to run it to a swirl pod, which we're gonna need if we do a V-mount intercooler, yada yada. You get the idea. All right, now we gotta put the intake manifold on. Whew, satisfying. I had to pull the studs out because the base was too thick. But they would have been nice because it makes that part easier. Oh man, it looks good to see it actually with the intake on. Just looks so incomplete without it. All right, now we've got this combination, which, oh, no, why aren't you going in? All your friends lined up just fine, and you don't want to go in. Then we've got a set screw that goes here, basically to hold the top of this. Alright, now we just got to tighten this set screw down and we're good. Alright, we got one more little project in our USDM conversion, and that is our crank pulley. This being a JDM crank pulley is a little bit larger than the USDM one, so the belt stuff we have wouldn't work, but we're in luck. Geraldo also hooked it up with a stock USDM crank pulley. Look, the keyway is the same. Yeah, look at that. Easy peasy. We gotta torque that to spec, but we'll get to that later. Alrighty, we got our USDM conversion complete. Again, it's nice because we can just get a normal USDM alternator if we have any issues. I got a fresh one on the way, so we'll have to slap that on. Then we can slap our belt system on, and we are done with the accessories. We've got our intake bolted on. Hopefully it doesn't have to come back off, we'll see. But it's on, it's tightened down, torqued to spec. It's good to go, and now that that's on, one, the engine looks way freaking better. It looks like an actual engine now. But now that that's on, we can start mapping out and running and plumbing and doing our fuel system. I've got a fuel rail coming tomorrow. Other than that, we should have everything we need to do the fuel system, which is another big major component to the build here. And one of the last ones, we're whittling it down. But before we even do that, there's a few, I need to do this before I forget to do it, things I want to take care of. Let's lift this thing up in the air and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Alright, so the first thing is these sway bar bolts. So I had to loosen these to drop the sway bar down to get the engine in, and I keep forgetting to tighten them. Project, which is inside the car. So I installed this GK Tech hidden hydro assembly in here, so the center console is going to cover all of this. So me and my buddy Josue got this thing bled, and it is super tight. It feels really solid. I'm really happy with it overall. The only thing I'm worried about is the angle of this cable has it rubbing on this hole in the bracket here. So I want to try to open that hole up and put some sort of bushing or sleeve in there just to prevent us rubbing through the cable. We've already rubbed through the plastic housing, just bleeding it. So just something I want to take care of before I forget. Yank this thing off here. That should give us close to a straight shot, but I still want to try to put some sort of liner in here so it's not rubbing on bare metal. Oh, that works literally perfect. This is for electrical wiring, flexible metal conduit. We're gonna super glue it in though. I'm gonna say I'm pretty happy with that. Just for scrounging some stuff together, that should work out perfect. Holes opened, shifted that way, and we've got a nice plastic bushing. I didn't want to do like a rubber grommet in here because I felt like it would drag on the cable. The cable should slip past easily, but it shouldn't wear it away. So we'll let the super glue dry a little bit, toss this back in, see how it all operates now. Much better. All right, now let's try to put this interior back together. Still got to make tabs to mount this correctly, but look at that. That's so cool. Haha, so satisfying. We still got to do some little stuff to wrap this up, and we might have to take it back out. But for now, this is so satisfying. Oh my gosh, it looks so cool to see it all in there. You would have no idea. There's a hidden handbrake there. You wouldn't, I mean, you'd kind of guess that this is a nice chassis mount shifter, but it's just cool to have a dual caliper hydro, a chassis mount shifter, but it all almost looks normal. It's kind of the theme of this car. Street car, but that performs well. So I'm stoked. I'm really happy to get those in. I got to make some brackets for that. We'll get to that later. We got plenty of little stuff to do on this car. We need to dive back into the big stuff, which is the fuel system. All right, we got our big box of fuel system parts. Let's get it unboxed. That was a weak snap. Hold on. Ta-da! Entire fuel system. I'm really excited about this setup. This is kind of the perfect setup for a street car. We've got a brushless in-tank pump, so it's 440 liters per hour. So it is a stout unit. It'll supply all the fuel we possibly need, but it's a tiny little in-tank pump. We don't have to do any surge tank, any inline pump, nothing complicated like that. Street car, remember, I know I keep saying it. Regulator, we've got an inline filter, so we can get rid of the stock junky setup and mount this in a better location. We got lines and fittings and everything we need to adapt it. We've got their hardline adapters. So these are going to allow us to convert from the stock fuel hat hardline, which is just, you know, a metal hardline, to our AN to run our new line. So we got a lot of stuff. We got a lot of stuff to install. We got lines to make. We got pumps to install. We got a lot of work ahead of us. Let's dive in. All right, I'm not gonna fuss with these. We're not using them, we're cutting them. Little trick, if you're removing fuel lines like this, take the gas cap off. It'll prevent them from wanting to just siphon out. Not want to come out. Alright, well that took some doing. This is one elaborate, weird fuel pump assembly. It's got like this built-in regulator, and the pump is massive. Gosh, that thing is so wild. Look at how, okay, this is a great comparison. I mean, this is a big pump. This one flows probably around twice as much. Do you see the size comparison? Do you see it? It's ridiculous. We gotta love technology. All right, we've got our Deechworks AN fittings on our hard lines coming out of the fuel hat here. So we've got feed and then return. Got our bulkhead connector on. It's a little bit of a struggle. There's not a lot of real estate on the top of this hat for this. And like you can see, our connector is right up against our fuel pump outlet here. But it should work. It's all in there good. It's all on there good. It's all connected correctly. Again, there's just, I mean, we had this much room to work with to mount this thing. It's an odd top hat, fuel hanger, everything. Everything about this thing is odd. Pretty good and well in there. All right, well, that is our fuel pump module complete. We got our brushless pump, fuel sock, wiring up to our bulkhead, which will go to our brushless controller. Still have to mount that, and then our 2 AN outlets. So that wasn't too bad. We can toss this back in, start plumbing and wiring. So we've got the fuel pump module back in. You can see, can't get to the either of the fittings, like where the lines are gonna go on, with the module in. So what I'm gonna have to do is leave the lines long enough to pull it back like that, connect and disconnect the lines, and then put it back into position. So we need to start making lines. Before we start making lines, we need to pull all the old stuff out, get it out of our way. But real quick, before we dive into that, let me show you the results of our rust removal process. We got all the scaly rust off. Now I can paint that thing with a clear conscience and put it back on the car. So I'm gonna knock that out real quick, and then we will dive into removing the old factory lines that are no longer gonna be needed. We got a little guy out here to help. Better late than never, right? So factory, the fuel lines run over the tank, boom, and then down along the driver's side frame rail and up into what would have been the engine, but the K-series, it's flipped. So our exhaust is on this side, our intake, thus our fuel rail, is on this side. Whereas the RB that came in this car was reverse of that. Because of that, we need to switch our fuel lines to this side because we're gonna be running the exhaust down here and they need to go over here anyway. So it is a way more logical side to route them on. We'll have room, we don't have to worry about exhaust burning them, and they'll be where they need to go anyway. So that is why we're ditching all of the stock lines. Normally I retain at least the factory hard return line just to use it and save running AN line. But in this situation, we kind of have to go AN on both the feed and return. So yeah, moral of the story is we gotta rip all these lines out. Let's get to it. I don't know why when I remove stuff like this that I know I'm not gonna reuse, I always try to keep it intact. I don't know why I do that. Don't know why. So all we have left on this side is our brake line. We'll need to secure it. Clamping the brake line ended up being a piece of cake because I was able to use a lot of the stock clip holes. This one I had to self-tapper just to keep it tucked up here, but otherwise we're able to use just the stock holes with M6 bolts. So that's all done. It's time to move on to the fuel lines. All right, let's get our first line started up. This is also a great use for PB. This is what I've always used to do AN lines. Especially now with the flow control, we'll just put a little bit in our fitting here to make it go on the line a little easier. Who is calling me? Hello? I hate these factory warranty things. I don't have a finance car. Not a single one, people. You're not gonna get me with that. We'll use a little PB on this guy. Really stepped up my AN game since the last time I had to build out a full fuel system. Got AN wrenches, got the adjustable one, the soft jaws. All I need now is an AN line cutter. After doing PTFE lines, normal AN ones seem so easy. Alright, so what I like to do when I build out my AN lines, I don't want to waste anything. I want to end up with the longest scrap possible. So I start, even though this is going to be a short run, I start with the whole roll. We're going to route the whole roll to where it needs to go and then cut it. It's a little redundant, but keeps you from wasting line. Alright, got line number one, our feed connected. Barely get this pulled back enough to get your hands on it, but we got it on. Now we need to route it to our next location. Termination point, if you will. And we have been getting lucky with the already there clamp holes. Alright, now that we've got our line clamped up, we need to mount our fuel filter housing. Alright, we got our fuel filter and housing all wrapped up. It's got built-in brackets, which is a nice addition to these. So we just need to figure out exactly where we want to mount it. This is why I need an AN line cutter. Not too bad with the old grinder though. We'll have to blow this line out, but I just want to get it assembled. Keep on trucking. It's always so satisfying when you punch, drill out, rib nut, and it all lines up. Look at that. Oh, so satisfying. So satisfying. Alright, so we're going to start this next line with a 45. Should angle us out of that spot perfectly. Oh, that is so perfect. All right, need a clamp. Well, here's what we've got so far. Comes off the top of the tank. It's clamped here. On the return, I'm gonna clamp it opposing this, using this same blind hole. So that'll be nice. We'll have the two, boom, boom. Comes down here, it's clamped here. I've got to clean up these edges and put some rubber on them because those are gonna rub through eventually. Nice 45 into the filter housing mounted all secure. 45 out, brings it down here. I couldn't spare on the clamps because, as you can see, this has hit the ground. We do not want this to hit the ground. So basically I wanted to keep this tucked up as high as I possibly could. So I had to use a lot of clamps. Unfortunately, I'm out of clamps. I need to go get some more clamps, but it doesn't really matter because I couldn't terminate the end of this anyway because the fuel rail hasn't come in yet and I need the fuel rail to know where to terminate it. So I guess that's a good enough stopping point for this video. We won't have a whole ton left to do to finish out the fuel system. Then we've got exhaust, intercooler, radiator, that stuff's coming, wiring, tidbits, and we get to see how this thing is. So we're getting real close, guys. We're getting real close. We got plenty more work to do, but the finish line is coming into view. So I hope to see you guys for the rest of it, but for now, that's gonna be it for this one. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, goodbye.